I began video 1 by asking, are there concepts we haven't yet arrived at that would help us better understand ourselves and the world around us? In this video, I'm going to call on the concepts I arrived at in the previous 6 videos to see how much help they can be. Because I deal with topics beyond the reach of science, I refer to my method as natural philosophy. That is, science, yes, but to it I have to add reasonable speculation. Please judge what I've arrived at, not by whether science confirms it, but by how plausible it is compared to what we think now. Okay? Warning. In this video, I'll be bringing in concepts early on that took much longer to explain in previous videos. As I go, I'll call out clips by number that will refer to links in the description, taking you to those longer explanations. Remember, in the first video, I had tabs running along the bottom of the screen, standing for the major bundles of concepts we already had, like this. This time, I'll be referring to a new set of tabs, like this. To tell my new story incorporating new concepts, I'm going to proceed as I did before by moving from one end of this set of tabs to the other. Let's begin. First tab, quantum particles. I've nothing to report. Next tab, purely physical matter. All of this I accept as science reports it. Then, first mind. Elsewhere, I imagined what must have been involved for life to begin. See clip 1. This required so much to come together, to happen in one time, in one spot, that scientists are starting to doubt that, in terms of today's physics, they could ever account for it. But living cells did, at some point, appear, and my explanation of that is, it involved mind-like properties or agents. If you thought all along I've been resorting to magic, this is where it must come in. For living creatures like us with minds to evolve, mind must have got involved at some point. And for me, the most likely time is right at the beginning. I think you're bound to ask me, what is mind? I don't know. I don't think we can know. We experience one kind of mind in ourselves as conscious thinking, so we know mind exists. For any other kind of mind, we can recognize it only by what it does, the evidence it leaves behind. For me, matter is determined, is entirely subject to the laws of physics. When something happens that physics can't account for, I look around for something else, something active, like us, has a mind of its own. See clip 2. And since in us we call that mind, I'm going to call those active agents that do what matter can't also mind. They're what eventually will evolve into our minds. I know that's a lot to appreciate right up front. Let me put it this way. We know we evolved with mind. When did mind first appear? I'm concluding it had to appear as soon as evolution, to make happen what physical matter alone couldn't make happen. Here's what I think had to intervene for life to begin, that physical matter alone can't account for, that demanded mind. First to be created, memory. Physical events may leave traces, like layers in rock faces, but they can't be queried. That takes those traces being recorded in memory. Then reason, able to query memory and make connections. That's what reason does for us. Nothing purely physical can reason. It doesn't have to. Everything's purely physical is determined. Then, a present moment. In the physical world, the present is the interface between past and future. It has no duration. But reason needs duration, a kind of time in which to gather memories, to trace connections, perhaps like what we call short-term memory. See clip 3. Then, prediction. If this happens, often that happens next. Then, intentionality. Since this is likely to happen next, I should do that. That's an intention. Followed by mind engaging matter to bring about an action. Think of a bacterium changing direction to pursue food. First, to do that, it has to have memory. It has to have connections made in memory. That's reason. Connections that predict food is nearby, that develop into an intention that then drives action. For the simplest life to exist takes mind. No wonder scientists despair of ever being able to account for it by physics alone. For the first living cell to form, all these aspects of mind had to be active at the same time in the same tiny location. What this suggests to me is mind exists like a cloud of mental talents that can come together to probe matter for possibilities and act together on those possibilities to realize them. Some mental talents may have been present there at the creation of life and never again, so we've no way to discover them. Some may exist but weren't called on for that first stage of evolution, maybe consciousness. That consciousness appeared in us only recently doesn't mean it didn't exist all along, guiding life's evolution further. And of course there may be mental processes not yet drawn on at all for a future science to discover and turn into technology. How many forms of mind would have to exist for us to all agree that mind is real? What I want to emphasize is, if we evolve to have minds, then logically all of evolution could involve mind. This changes everything. Next tab. Genomes evolve mental powers. Where would that mind have been? I'm going to suggest it was in genomes. Picture genomes coming not only with a body or brain, the chromosomes they consist of, but also a mind. They had to evolve minds first before they could create living creatures like us with minds. Genomes, I'm going to claim, are the primary agents of evolution. Here's why. Genomes are the longest, most complex molecules we know about in the universe, by many orders of magnitude. They are unique. Passing on from living cell to living cell, from one generation to the next, they have persisted down through the entire history of evolution. I propose they consist of both the brain and mind, as we do. To repeat, they had to evolve along with their mental talents before they could code for all the species of living creatures ever. See clip 4. The genome? Which genome? Logic drew me to conclude genomes work together. I quote the example of a Hydra disrupted into separate cells that in a few days will reorganize itself back into its original form. I suppose something similar accounted for how single-celled embryos could grow into a multi-trillion-celled adult. For this to be true, genomes would have to be telepathic, eventually forming a single global mind, a network with nodes for every kind of living creature and all forms of life down to individual cells. See clip 5. I realize by suggesting genes are telepathic, I may make my argument less plausible, but it might help account for some puzzling properties of living kingdoms, such as complex features being shared across distant branches in the tree of life. I say genomes have minds, can think. Can they feel emotions? We know they can carry code for emotions because at puberty we experience a whole new world of feelings and urges that plainly had to be coded for first in our genome before they could appear in us. If it occurred to them to give us emotions, I take that as a sign they're likely to experience emotions too. New mechanism of evolution in that tab. One of the mental talents I mentioned needed for the formation of the first life was intentionality. We experience as part of our own conscious thinking. Our trains of thought often end in an intention that we then carry out. We evolved this trait of intentionality. Can we recognize intentionalities in other creatures? Take a spider spinning a web. That ability that the spider is born with, specified by its genes, clearly expresses an intention to catch insects. Bees' ability to gather ingredients for making honey clearly expresses intentionality to feed their young. These creatures have obviously evolved intentionalities. What is evolution? I suggest it's essentially genomes thinking interspecies of living creatures new intentionalities. Here's how. Having a mind like us, a genome can recall thoughts from memory, but its memory can only be the genes spelled out along its chromosomes. Once it has brought these thoughts to mind, it can think about them some more, imagine new kinds of intentionality to add to them, and then store those thoughts back into memory as changes to those genes. But it's by its genes that we define a species. So a genome can think new species into existence with new intentionalities. This is a new mind-based mechanism of evolution. See clip 6. Today's theory of evolution, the modern synthesis, combines two purely physical processes, chromosomes suffering random damage, followed by a picking over of that damage by natural selection. How does that compare to what I'm proposing? See clip 7. Would it matter which mechanism of evolution you subscribe to? I imagine subscribing to a purely physical mechanism might induce you to ignore phenomena in nature that theory would have difficulty accounting for, such as us being conscious. You don't have that problem if you adopt a mind-based mechanism. Human-based thinking. Some people, I think this is typical of physicalists, say they don't have conscious experiences. They can be aware of what their senses tell them and questions they're asked, even of what they say or do in response. But what happens between being asked a question and their response, they describe it as if happening behind an opaque curtain that they can know nothing about. For them, thinking doesn't involve anything mysterious like mind. It need involve nothing more than purely physical processes that we haven't yet clearly defined. What I talk about here, conscious thinking, is for the rest of us, probably 2/3 of us who do experience the kind of conscious thinking that comes between what we become aware of and how we respond. Check out the results of a survey I run on this site. See clip 8. Here's what I experience. Conscious thinking consists of trains of thoughts that link to one another in ways that seem entirely unphysical. Reasoning about something, doubting something, supposing something. They seem to have no location, no substance you can weigh or measure. They observe no laws of conservation as material things do. In everyday language, thoughts are mental, not physical. Where do we get this kind of thinking? A few moments ago, I described how genomes can literally think into existence new species of living creatures. So the genome's thinking is equivalent to something evolving. Could that be true of us? Could conscious thinking in us be our thoughts evolving, each thought evolving into the next? Think that, and we can account for everything happening in the universe with a combination of physical and mental processes. See clip 9. Us having become conscious suggests that genomes are conscious too. If so, they're likely been conscious all along. See clip 11. That's why I introduced consciousness as among the mental properties present at the birth of life itself. It's likely been active all throughout evolution, consciously dreaming up new intentionalities to embed in its creatures. Our experience of consciousness faces up with another aspect of mind. Thought seems to consist of meanings. These seem to be real. We can write them down, make a manifesto out of them. They can make a physical difference to something. Introducing meanings helps flesh out the memory I said had to be created for life to begin. In that memory, physical events turned into meanings that reason could then work on. Meanings are the raw materials consciousness runs on. Suddenly, if you accept this thought, the world is awash in proofs of mind, in the torrent of meanings we create and face every day. They're a product of mind. The great mystery Charles Darwin was trying to solve was, where do various species of living creatures come from? According to my mind-based theory, species are thoughts involving meanings in the minds of genomes. Human creativity and free will. Creativity. I find I can be creative only when I'm conscious. See clip 11. Having evolved able to be conscious helps account for where we got free will. I no longer think of free will as simply complete freedom from being determined. Instead, I think of free will as what becomes possible when you have mental talents such as reason, intentionality, and creativity that the laws of physics don't apply to. According to physics, such mental talents can't exist, but they're essential for life to emerge. To me, evolution's creativity proves physics is wrong. Access to genome thought. The final tabs are all to do with how far we can access genome thinking. How much of culture grew out of talents we got from our genome? Domestication of livestock? Manual dexterity used for creating crafts? Play? Math and logic? Science? arts, humor. To me, culture is almost defined for us in the gifts the genome gave us. See clip 12. Are there ways we've been given access to genome playfulness? For an example, our appreciation of beauty? See clip 13. Suppose we discover ways the genomes think, that we could incorporate them into how we think to expand our own consciousness. I've a story about that in this channel. See clip 14. What we value is what drives our economy. Where do those values come from? See clip 15. Surely they originate in how we evolved. Play, for example, competitiveness, body sensations such as massage and moves in dancing. If our current economy fails, we will have to dig into our inherited wealth of meanings to come up with new forms of exchange. Olympic sports is a mere century-old example of new meaning. Oral history as storytelling, as Homer models for us, we've largely abandoned. New ones are bound to emerge from the richness of our evolved inheritance. Gods, magic. I suggested we look to genomes for our values. Am I proposing we make our genome into a modern form of God? No, and I detailed why not, particularly why the genome can't serve us as a personal God. See clip 16. So I am not a creationist, ascribing the wonders of evolution to the Christian God. What I clearly am in these videos is a vitalist. But I'm okay with that. It aligns me with philosophers such as A.N. Whitehead, Henry Bergson, and more recently Thomas Nagel, who are by no means disreputable. And by talking about mind and matter as if they were independent realities, I may be dismissed as a dualist, but so is modern panpsychism, newly popular, which makes dualism newly respectable. What I may more fairly be accused of is inviting a new wave of magic. I've tried so far to maintain disciplined logic, combining science's reports and my own personal experience in a coherent argument in the tradition of natural philosophy. But I opened the way to suppose many other forms of mind exist with any manner of properties. How should you respond? Let me give you some practice with some ideas that stray beyond the bounds of logic I've stayed within so far. Why did our genome bestow on us in the course of our evolution so many goodies? See clip 17. Does being granted that bounty imply a mission we're intended to fulfill? Could we be meant to carry our genomes with us on journeys among the planets and the stars? Or, more fancifully, by making each of us an arena in which thoughts can evolve, do the genomes mean us to succeed them as the next platform for evolution? Does coming up with such far-fetched speculation encourage a return to magic? Should I clearly distinguish between them and natural philosophy, perhaps by calling them fantasies? Maybe it doesn't matter. What was magic in one period of history became science in another. So, do I encourage magic making? If so, I think that's okay. Here's a review. I began by asking, are there important concepts we're missing that would help us better understand ourselves and the world around us? For me, That's called for the revival of natural philosophy. Natural philosophy invites us to venture beyond what science can tell us by drawing on all the knowledge and wisdom we've accumulated. The discipline it imposes on us is to stay within the bounds of deduction from experience and reason, which I have tried to do. Here are concepts I've arrived at. Our own conscious experience tells us mind exists, independent of purely physical processes, and logic suggests it must exist not only in ourselves, but in the evolution of all living creatures, including genomes, not only today, but throughout the entire course of evolution, right back to life's origin. For us to be conscious, mind must have become involved in our evolution at some time. No stage is more likely than right there at the beginning. Why isn't this received wisdom today? The primary villain is Descartes, who declared all evolved creatures to be purely physical, just machinery, accepting only human conscious thinking. But once we discovered we were just another evolved creature, then we became just purely mechanical, too. Why do we still believe this, viewing all of life as mere machinery? Our second villain is Charles Darwin. As he was trying to account for evolution, Darwin became an early convert to Auguste Comte's reductionism. All scientific explanations should be in terms of physics. So Darwin settled on a simple physical process. Individuals in each generation inherit the characteristics that made their predecessors more likely to survive, leading eventually to change enough to define a new species. And finally, physicalists, those among us who don't experience consciousness, who need nothing more than physics to account for human nature. They welcomed an account of human origins that was purely physical. And science appeared to support them. Since mind is not physical, it can't be detected by any purely physical process. They seized on this absence of evidence for mind as proof that consciousness and mind in general does not exist. This is how evolution is represented in the school science classroom today. By going along with this, we all contribute to the children not being made aware of the role of mind in themselves and the world around them. It's been my mission for the past 30 years to call for the abandonment of Darwinism and the modern synthesis. I see it leading to physicalism and decadence. In this channel, as I said before, you can find 3 videos pointing out deficiencies in the modern synthesis. See clip 18. A separate playlist in this channel, Physicalism Critical Reviews, carries critiques of notable physicalists. See clip 19. In the playlist Mind in Evolution, reviews of pioneering works in evolutionary theory, I note what role each of those pioneers gave to mind. See clip 20. Do I believe what I've said here? No. And yes. No, because it's all so speculative without any backup from science. But yes, I do believe it for the comfort it brings. It leaves nothing unaccounted for, nothing supernatural, no mysteries. Mind becomes less mysterious the more I find it can account for. If I find living creatures miraculous, that's a reflection of their genomes. And much about myself that I used to find mysterious, I now recognized as bestowed on me by my own genome in the course of evolution. and all that, nothing unaccountable for, is a comfort. Do I recommend you believe it? Only if you think you're missing concepts that would help you better understand yourself and the world around you. These videos are my attempt to place on record such a set of concepts.